Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage, a video series and/or podcast about designing better miniature games. My name's Mike, and I'm done the design of Gaslands and also A Billion Suns, and some other fine things that you can find in the Blaster Games Anthology by looking on the internet for it. His name is Glenn Ford. Hello, Glenn.
Hi, Mike. My name's Ben Ford. I am the designer of games such as SSO, the second edition of which is currently storming Kickstarter rather splendidly. I also did development on many of the things which Mike has put his name to. And today, Mike, we're talking about. We have been talking about.
Wait. Let's find out. I've got a dice here.
Well,
If I roll a
sc-
six, we have to change topic. Oh, it's a five. No, we're all right. We can talk
okay.
about luck versus skill in tabletop
We can
games design.
continue to talk about luck versus skill. How fortuitous for us. So we've been talking about luck and skill within miniatures war games, and in this part of the conversation, we've talked a little bit about luck, about output randomness, about how it can sometimes be cruel and it can take the game away from you, and about how there are some people who like randomness, but there are some people who absolutely hate it. And despite that fact, I would say that miniatures gaming is quite addicted to output randomness. It's almost unknown that you'll come across a miniatures tabletop battle game that doesn't have some level of output randomness, which is kind of odd in a way.
I mean, we even debated at the very beginning of this series whether we should call them. You were talking about tape measures and dice games. Like the handful of D6 is so iconically associated with the toy soldier. It's quite surprising.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to this topic, I was sort of making some show notes, and I thought, okay, what is the purpose of luck in a game? I thought, okay, it could be this, it can be that, blah blah blah. I thought, okay, well, what is the purpose of skill in a game? Well, that question doesn't make any sense. To even ask that question seems bizarre. It's like, well, the purpose of the game is that there should be some level of skill in it. If there's literally no skill whatsoever in the game, if it is literally sort of as snakes and ladders or something similar, where it's all deterministic and mechanical and predetermined, and you basically may as well not be there. It seems mind-boggling to imagine that you have a game that would have zero skill, but it
Well,
doesn't seem.
again, not to call back to role playing. Like there is an element to which, like, from a purely tactical standpoint, a lot of role playing experience, some role playing experiences that I've had are zero skill insofar as there's some randomness about what occurs. Like the encounter that we have to deal with, and then we use our imaginations to sort of engage with that mechanically. We then roll some dice and find out. But like
No,
the skill sort of manifests in terms of like, are we creating something together? And I think that's
yeah,
that's the only place that I could go with that question you're
I
asking.
mean, I would argue vociferously that using your imagination to engage with a fantasy world is not a form of skill is a sentence that I cannot get behind. I
No,
mean,
that's true.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's fair.
you tell the world of sort of computer programmers that achieving that level of thing is not anything to do with a skill or an ability, and they'll
Well, I
stab you
suppose
in the
this
neck.
is actually, yeah, this is maybe a trap that I'm falling into, which is that by creating a dichotomy of luck versus skill, it's sort of saying by which measure did you achieve victory in an adversarial game environment? Because I think that's tends to be what is implied by that. And so if you won, did you
Hmm.
win because you outclassed me, you outthought me, you outstrategized me, you out understood the mechanics and the mechanisms, or did I roll more sixes? And in a game of collaborative imaginative storytelling, or a game of collaborative imaginative narrative wargaming, like, the skill is how well we created that narrative,
Hmm.
how cleverly we came up with rationales for the actions of the little tin soldiers and so forth, and how
Yeah.
satisfying we how satisfying it was to come away from that story.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow like series like Critical Role and things like that, the people around those tables have what is undeniably a skill set of a very high and and refined level in order to play role playing games at an unusually sophisticated and high level. And not the skills that role playing games require of you are some of the most nuanced and finely balanced skills that human beings have
It's true.
attachment to.
I can't
But
role play when I'm tired because of that. Like I need my best brain when I do that.
yeah,
Um,
um,
but that I
but
think that goes back to the beer and pretzels thing, which is, when I don't have my best brain, then I want to play something which is reasonably high luck content, so that I don't have to rely on skill, and it doesn't have to be a pure skill environment.
So yeah, so I mean, to track back from the world of role playing to the world of miniatures tabletop gaming, um, it seems, as I say, it seems bizarre to ask the question, what is the purpose of skill within games? But there is a chewy question about what is the purpose of luck, and if what the purpose of luck is a valid question. The question is, well, why do we have it? If there's a question about it, why is it even in there? And so, hopefully in this video, we're going to talk a bit about why there is luck in games, why there is random chance in there, on various levels. Now, I have two personal,
I mean,
reasons
I'll
for
be honest
this.
with you, I'm worried about this because I'm going to have to justify my obsession and addiction to involve it to including luck in my games, and I'm not sure that I have the philosophical toolkit to defend myself.
I mean, personally, the first and I think the biggest reason for having luck within a miniatures tabletop war game is, in simple terms, is to keep players off balance. What luck does is it ensures the first plan you had when starting the game is not the last plan you have when you end the game. Ideally, games I think should have in board games, we talk about a laddering effect in games. Ideally, you should start off able to do a certain set of things, and by the end of the game, you should be able to do things you weren't able to do at the start of the game. And that's a laddering effect in board games. If you're doing the same thing on the final turn of the game as you're doing on the first turn of the game, that's bad. Why did you bother going through all those turns? We should have had a one-turn game.
Right, which is oddly opposed to the world of tabletop war games.
Yes, in tabletop war games, you can do way less on the last turn than you could do on the first turn.
All your
way
stuff's
less.
dead.
Most of your stuff is dead. So you can't have laddering. You can't have a place where the reason that you played the game was in order to be able to achieve more. I
sense a design challenge, Glenn.
In relation to the fact that Hobgoblin was about Advance Wars, I saw somebody having a conversation about whether you could design a game that's more like Command and Conquer or Dune 2, where you have things that can build units on turn one, but you don't have units. And can you do that within a sensible tabletop war game?
So the answer is yes, and I'm working on it in secret as a Billion Suns expansion, because I am also obsessed with that. And A Billion Suns, broadly speaking, already does it. It's just that instead of factories, you have jump points, and instead of an escalating factory infrastructure, you don't yet have an escalating sort of jump capability where you're only allowed to jump in larger things in later turns. But I definitely think there's a mechanism to do that.
But in broad terms, we don't generally have laddering within tabletop miniatures war games. Because I have everything that I'm ever going to be able to have and make decisions with and do things with in those sorts of games at the start of the game, in order for me to not know what my plan is going to be on turn 5 or 6,
Yeah.
I need to have random chance. I need to have some chance that pops in there and goes, you know what? The plan that you turned up with is not the plan that you can end with. That is interesting to you. Without random chance, I could just be fully planted and on balance throughout the whole game. I could hand you a piloting list and go, this is what my units are going to do. I'll be off. I'll go and have a sandwich and come back. Let me know how it panned out. I'll tell you what, to be honest with you, I know how it's going to pan out. I did a really good job writing that list. I'm going to mash you. And in order that doesn't happen, we like to put in random chance. And in my opinion, the best random chance is the one that goes, okay, you thought this was a situation, twist, turns out this is a situation. How are you going to react to that?
I mean, I think one of the most startling examples of that is the bolt action activation system. Like that's I think a really beautiful example of that, where it says, you thought, you had a plan, but you can never be sure in what order the operations are going to fall out, and therefore somebody's going to get the jump on you. You can guarantee someone's going to get the jump on you, but you don't know exactly how that's going to unfold, which I think is why that system's so exciting and interesting.
No, I think
that's interesting. So in the writing of Hobgoblin, now that you bring this up, I put a specific note sort of in the what I'd wrote 6 years ago. I wrote a specific note to myself, which was that the purpose of both the magic system and the fortune card systems, which are like a deck of cards that you get dealt during the game and which can provide funny additional effects on the game, was to dissolve moments of certainty into uncertainty, and to introduce these things where you couldn't know what the outcome was, because there was always a couple of cards waiting in someone's hand and you didn't know whether they were going to be able to affect it. So I think that's absolutely right, is you need to be able to introduce some noise into the system where I have a plan, but the noise that's been introduced means that I can't 100% know how it's going to fall out.
And I think this is where, again, people are very keen that randomness should be input randomness, because what I want is for the game to keep me off balance and keep forcing me to come up with new plans on the fly. I want to have to react to interesting tactical situations. And because I want the chance to react to the interesting tactical situation. What I don't want
that's why people is to like be those tennis ball launchers.
Yes, yeah.
The equivalent.
Random. Yes. So you want it coming at you, but you want to have, I want to test myself with fractions of seconds to react on the fly as they come at me. What I don't want is to, instead of a tennis ball launcher, have a launcher that occasionally is a full ball laser that just burns me off the face of the planet before I can even see it happening. Because
tennis ball, hand grenade.
Yeah, I want chance to come in, and I want it to destroy my plans, but I want the opportunity to come up with new plans. And I think that's why people want input randomness, or something that appears to be input randomness, and they see output randomness as something that just destroys their plans and leaves them with no opportunity to have plans.
There's a few other elements. One is that it's fun to roll dice, but we'll set that one aside. The other is that there is a I'm not sure exactly how to couch this, but there is a sort of human narrative tendency to take chance and turn it into moments of heroism. And if there is no randomness and I just get trounced, I'm not really so able to sort of lord that over you. But if there is an element of chance, then I can kind of add some. I can take my hubris and I can dial it down with a bit of like, the god of fate was with me, and so we can tell better stories and more enjoyable sort of shared stories about those moments of randomness, even if they were born up on skill and outplayedness. They can sort of be socially softened by the fact that there was some dice rolled. And I think that there's a lot of moments that we remember as gamers which are very much steeped in like, I was just about to get trounced, and then I did get trounced, but it was like it was so bad, and all the dice rolled.
It's tough because I've been playing a bit of Magic the Gathering Arena recently. I'd gotten away from Magic the Gathering for various reasons for ages, and then got Arena. It's like, oh, this is fantastic. It's completely free, and pay to win is much less of a thing. But there comes a point in a lot of games where you're somebody else is down and they're more or less done, and they don't concede and they keep playing. You're sort of thinking, well, why are you still playing? And then they top deck the win, and they do that. Your hand's empty, and you pull one card and you play the card. It's like, right, brilliant. Yeah, no, the one card in your deck that gives you the win. Fantastic. That's great. That's satisfying for everybody. Are you proud? You proud that happened?
And they're not unhappy.
Well, yeah, and that's the difficult thing of the sort of the mystery of hope of randomness, because what it ends up being sometimes is you're definitely losing, but there's this tiny nugget of hope that keeps you clinging on, and 9 times out of 10 you're just having your fingers broken one at a time as you're clinging to the cliff edge, and it's just horrible and it's just mean, and then you inevitably plummet. Apart from one time in 100 where it turns out the last finger has a shotgun in it, you blow the other person's face off, and then you don't feel big and smart and clever, and the other person doesn't feel satisfied. Nobody feels that was righteous, but you go, yeah, but a win's a win, isn't it? So stuff you.
Maybe, yeah.
I claimed it. And it's, where randomness gives mystery and hope and means that every little encounter isn't over until the fat lady sings, that can have a bit of spice and a bit of chew to it. Where it means that no game is ever decided until the last thing happens, you can often end up in a situation where people go, well, why am I bothering to engage with the actual
rest of the
game and the rules? Well, I'll just do whatever, and then it'll turn out in the end that magically, in the previous video, we talked about dice chess, which is you play a game of chess and then you roll a dice, and on the 6, you reverse the results. The best chess player is still the best dice chess player. If instead dice chess were, at the end of it, you roll a dice on a 2 to 6, you reverse the result, everyone playing that version of dice chess would go, well, why am I bothering to care about how I move them? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter a damn how I move the pawns. You just turn around and the dice will suddenly magically mean you win. I'll try and throw the match at that point. And I think when you have a system where a single piece of output randomness can completely change the result, you undermine people caring about the result, unless you have a very sort of narrative attitude towards things.
So it's intriguing because in the last episode you talked about the sort of perceived sacrosanctness of input randomness, and actually as you're talking I'm realizing that 2 of my most frustrating game experiences are to do with input randomness, which I think I actually like significantly less. So the 2 games that I have been very frustrated with in the past are War Master and Magic the Gathering. And in War Master, at the beginning of the turn, we'll forget about the previous turn for the sake of this illustration, but at the sort of beginning of the turn or during your turn, you find out whether or not you get to activate your units. And then, having activated a unit, like it can then do some stuff, but then you find out whether you get to do another one. And in Magic the Gathering, my predominant frustration with that is the number of times that I have had non-games where I don't draw sufficient lands, or I have a little land drought in the middle of a game. And I know that that's supposed to work out over a number of games, but I used to play it as a kid, with my tiny hands that couldn't shuffle decks, and we didn't have digital decks to shuffle for us. And so, I'd play maybe 3 or 4 games and it perhaps wouldn't work out the randomness to the degree that it needs to. And in both of those cases, I felt like the game was over before it had started, because the input randomness had sort of blown a raspberry at me and said, well, how about you don't have a game at all to start with? And I would have much preferred to have got all of my toys and thrown them all out and found out that they all were duds and that, they all got their teeth kicked in, because at least there'd be blood everywhere and I'd have had a fun time.
I mean, funnily enough, in an interview, Richard Garfield, the designer of Magic the Gathering, specifically said that he put in the possibility of mana flood or drought in order that a really good player could be beaten by anyone can lose a game of Magic the Gathering. He, I think, sees it as an ultimate piece of output randomness. You no matter how well you build your deck, you can just get full mana drought and just sit there and get pantsed by anybody. And he realized that was a possibility and left it in. He says left it in intentionally in order to maintain the air
he's a
of
fine
mystery.
And thoughtful designer. I'm sure he did it on purpose. It's just
I'm sure if he says he did it on purpose, I'm certain he did.
That's just the element of that game that really turns me off. Playing it casually as a kid who didn't bother. I never engaged with the pay to win element of it anyway. So setting that aside, I think that's probably the second most frustrating thing about it.
It's funny, and and this is a slight aside, but and this is interesting because it seems to happen to any tabletop game that has a digital version. But the discussions about the shuffling algorithm of the Magic Gathering Arena and how it's definitely biased at various points are legion on the various forums. And it's interesting because literally every the Talisman board game had a digital version that had some very people got very upset about the dice rolling algorithm in it.
Yeah, I remember.
And almost any tabletop game that has an element of chance and it has a digital version, people are absolutely certain that random algorithm is against them in some very sort of concerted and sort of pressured way. And I think it's interesting because one of the things about random chance and one of the things about human beings is that we put things into stories, we shape things into narratives, and if you give somebody a bunch of random results, they are going to put a narrative on it. And if the thing at the other end of those random results is in some way opposed to them, they're going to decide that thing is intelligently and intentionally opposed to them. And it's very easy with a set of dice to realize that, oh, I'm just putting it onto the dice. I know full well, the number of people say, oh, my dice hate me and all, the dice are against me. As soon as you have a computer generating those dice, it's a lot easier to believe that the computer hates you, because we know that they have mystical and unusual brains that we don't fully understand. So definitely,
well, it's a gestalt that you can point at rather than these individual dice, which you can get cross at that one or this one, or all of you guys are all in the box. You're back in the
So definitely, if I have to triple mulligan, 4 games in a row on Magic Arena, it's definitely a conspiracy. Whereas that happens in Magic in real life, and it's like
So
dice be crazy.
You sort of mentioned this at the beginning, but there really aren't very many tabletop miniature games that have eschewed luck entirely. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can't think of one.
Not miniatures games, no.
No. So having noticed this, I did flirt, and I think we talked about this some months ago on Hobgoblin, the first time we talked about it. I have flirted a bit with the idea of removing luck from Hobgoblin. Ultimately, I decided against it, but there was a period where the number of dice that units rolled changed from 10 to 12, and the very specific reason for that was I was planning to add an optional rule that said, by the way, if you want to play in hardcore mode, you don't roll the 12 dice, they simply come out in 3 rows of 1 to 6 every time, and you always get a statistically average result. And that, I think, is the problem. It always generates a statistically average result. It's just not very interesting if for all the reasons that you've unpacked. Like there's some delight and peril and storytelling and like human attraction to pulling the one-armed bandit that just gets lost in that. And the upside was an increase in the calculability of the outcome such that you could deploy your skill more efficiently. But it just, I mean, particularly for the design principles of Hobgoblin, but it just didn't feel it didn't feel like a worthy sacrifice. It didn't feel like you were getting enough of a bump on the side of skill with the with the resulting drop in serendipity and narrative and human stories and, you know, the vaguely addictive nature of random chance. So yeah, it's interesting. I can definitely do it. I can do it with Hobgoblin. There's no question. Like it could be done, and I just choose not to.
I mean, I think the truth of the matter is that the main reason that, you know, luck is in a lot of tabletop war games is that designing a fun game without luck is hard. It's so hard. I mean, the thing about chess is, and you know, I don't know whether this is sacrilegious or whatever, but if chess came out today, nobody would play it. You know, the reason that chess works is that it has this massive meta built around it of a history of games. And the people who played chess don't play chess. They don't engage with a chessboard and each set of
no. They study chess. They don't play chess. They study chess.
And they bring to bear, you know, pre-memorized sections of game. They play maybe, you know, 5% of any given chess game that they play. They don't care about any part of, until the sort of the last maybe 5% most of the time, and that's when they engage themselves. And the reason that they're, you know, by and large, you know, a particular subset of people is that they've memorized literally thousands and thousands of openings and move sets and responses and mid games and mid late games, you know. And then they're not playing chess, they're playing the meta game of chess. I think if somebody came up with chess today and this is why, again, you know, if you look on Kickstarter, on an almost weekly basis, somebody is trying to launch Chess 2 or Chess Alternative or Chess 3.4.
Or Chess,
you know,
if you haven't played that on the App Store.
and the answer is, you know, a new version of chess is just awful. It's just it's not fun. People don't want it, you know. And a miniatures war game that has literally no chance and is fun and is interesting and is engaging, it's just absolutely bow-shakingly difficult for very little reward. I mean, why that is possibly what part of this conversation was meant to be about. And I'm not entirely certain I know exactly why, but it's definitely true. It's definitely true that without any
I don't know exactly why, but having tried to take it out, I didn't like what was left, and I didn't feel like the purity of the design expression. It didn't deliver the value. So there is a huge amount of delight that those dice are putting in. And of course, I don't really like. I think one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of the love goes into the miniatures and the terrain, whereas in a board game you've got a lot more cards and, you know, stacks of tokens that come out at random, and there's a lot more places to place randomness. I think there's maybe not enough. There's not enough like places where miniature games sort of like, you know, heroes spring from nowhere, or there are assassins hidden in the ranks, like, you know, tiny sprinkling of that. I think there's probably lots of other places to play with randomness that maybe aren't explored, where there are pools of dice being rolled, and that's the default. But I think trying to take it out completely, or trying to go for a pure bluffing system, it's really tricky.
I think the thing that's interesting, and I think we'll sort of come towards wrapping this conversation up, but the thing that's interesting in board games is hidden information a lot easier to do in board games. So if you look at a game like Stratego, for example, it's a fantastic game, doesn't have randomness. It's genuinely, I think, more fun than chess to actually play and engage with. And it's all built around hidden information. And there are lots of board games that replace randomness with hidden information, because you can do that. You can completely replace randomness with hidden information. You can have a zero randomness game, but within the system, as a whole, certain players don't have access to all the information, and therefore you can get all the things that you would normally get out of randomness through hidden information. Now, hidden information in a miniatures war game is extremely difficult. It's very, very bookkeeping intensive, because miniatures war games don't naturally have elegant ways of bookkeeping. You end up saying, okay, get out a notebook and start writing copious, diligent, and detailed
I'm
notes.
Thinking, all right, you've both got a deck of cards, you lay some cards down near the units, and when you go to attack, it turns out, oh, these guys are a bit tired. Oh no.
Yeah. And this is the thing, in a board game, a hidden information board game can build the whole game around hiding the information and keeping everybody honest and noting it, and et cetera, and they can be very bespoke around doing that. Miniatures war games really can't do it. And having hidden information that's held honestly with minimal bookkeeping, without bespoke components, is really hard. And personally, I think that might be one of the reasons that miniature war games remains hooked on random chance, because it does all of the things that would replace it, and all the things that can replace it in board games are just too sort of resource intensive. I mean, possibly,
we've messed around with this before, because I'm thinking, what would we do to design one of those? And I'm thinking back to the Assassins game that we toyed around with, where we tried to write a sort of Assassin's Creed miniature game where you were leaping around a city trying to assassinate people, and you can hide in crowds and stuff. And we kept iterating it and iterating it, and we just ended up just going, well, this is a board game. It's just better as a board game, because about hidden information, and the miniatures don't matter in the same way. And
and personally, every time I sit down to design anything, I always have a moment of going, okay, which medium is the best for this? Because if I'm just ice skating uphill by making this a miniatures war game, I'll just make it a board game. If it just should be a board game, and I'm just swimming against the tide by making it not a board game, I'll just make it a board game. And any of the things that would replace chance end up just being, you're just saving yourself a hiding to nothing by just making it a board game. Possibly that's what it is. Possibly it's
but we might be missing something fundamental here. I agree with you, but it frustrates me that that's the answer.
Yes, I mean, maybe in a few months' time we'll revisit this subject and have some magical thing. Maybe
we've solved hidden information miniature games.
It's as Homer says about his cocktail. He doesn't know the chemical reason, but fire made it good. Maybe chance it's just fire makes it good. Anyway, with that complete and fundamental lack of an answer to the
only thing that's left is to find out whether we have to do another half an hour. So if we get a 6, we have to do another 30 minutes. It's a 2. We're all right.
Thank goodness. The mighty dice has spoken. We can wrap up at this point. Sorry for not nailing down a thorny issue. We'll no doubt revisit it at some later point. If you have watched to this point, presumably enjoyed watching us struggle with the subject. If you did, please like and subscribe. Maybe you have some fantastic insight into exactly what it is about miniatures war games that love luck, what it is about luck that loves miniatures war games. Please give us a comment, help us out. We've obviously not managed to plumb down to the depths of this one. Give us something to talk about when we revisit this in part 2 of this conversation at some point in the future. Either way, give us a comment, like and subscribe. Reach out to us on social media. I'm on most of them. Mike's on Twitter. There are various things that will tell us how to reach us below this video. But for now, we're going to sign off and say thank you very much for watching on this episode of Rule of Carnage.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
bye, 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 bye.